And I think with the NEP, we can't say, okay, I can't do it, because we can do it. The NEP actually talks about doing this. So the goals of the NEP are very much aligned with goal 4.7. I mean, this is something that, as teachers, we can leverage. So when we look at what should the curriculum really do? I mean, when we say ESD and when we say that we want to build these capacities among the students, what is it that universities should do? So building these competencies, building competencies of data collection and information, yeah, assessing at the same time their quality and enabling them to construct knowledge. So using a constructivist approach in our teaching, not dictating or not just, a one-way transfer of knowledge, but, using this different kind of pedagogy. We have so much of fake news now. Even I find it difficult to distinguish fake news from true news. But is that an important aspect of ESD? Yes. So the ability to assess the quality of information is important. And is that a key competency of any of our education courses? Yes, it is. Yeah, and that's good enough for ESD as well. Problem solving. Yeah. Again, here we did a little different experiment. We put students from our various courses together. So we actually formed teams to solve a problem with a person who comes from a physics background, a biological background, a mathematics background, putting them together and saying, okay, this is the problem, and you need to use your own knowledge to solve the problem. And this automatically brings students together to say, okay, we can measure through maths, and I can assess using my social science techniques. So this kind of thing. So using these different approaches to give projects to students. And again, this is what the NEP talks about. Yeah. So where you help them overcome socio-cultural barriers and other barriers that normally exist in society. This, I think, is really very important. The ability to question, the ability to decide, okay, this research paper, talks about this, but is it the gospel truth? I mean, just because it's published, is it right? I mean, can that be questioned? So the ability to question this, and I think this also comes through our research methodology classes, so getting them into this ability, or even bringing in critical thinking through case study approaches, in our own classrooms. So how do we do that? Also the ability to self-criticize. Yeah, this is extremely important. We're looking at communicating and negotiating. And when we look at ESD and SD in general, it's important. So you have the knowledge. How do you communicate, with policymakers, with scientists, with people who are completely illiterate? How do you communicate? How do you convince? And how do you negotiate? Yeah. So it's the same case example that I gave you with vermicomposting. To set it up, one has the knowledge, but how do you communicate and how do you negotiate that the vermicomposting will be there? Yeah. So it's simple, beginning with something as simple as that to going on to, bigger negotiations. Most importantly, the ability to have this systems view and not look through a keyhole. Oh, I'm a geographer, I'm going to only see this little lens. I don't need to interact with a philosopher, or I don't need to interact with an economist. Can we say, okay, let me get out of my comfort zone, yeah, and let me move out and let me work with people who don't think like me, because that's the only way that I am going to learn something new. Yeah, so this ability to see the connections within the whole system and its relevance to a problem. Anticipatory, the ability to evaluate the risks. So if I do this, then this is what is going to happen. If we do this, then this is what is going to happen. And all of these can be built into case studies, into our practicals, into our lectures, into the co-curricular, work that we do. Yeah, and of course, the competency of self-awareness, being, very sure of what we need. And if you look at ESD, this is what also NEP. This is also what NEP talks about. Collaborative is very important. So collaborating across different stakeholders. And I think today everything is collaborative. So this whole thing of, one person holding the knowledge, or, one person having the rights is really completely going away. And to this, I would really like to give you an example of, citizen science. So when citizen science was sort of born in the early 2000s, I unfortunately don't have a graph here, but I do have a graph. People thought that, this was rubbish, or Wikipedia, people thought this was rubbish. Yeah. Who is going to really contribute data? And yes, even I grew up in an era where data was held like gold, or maps were held like gold, and with departments refusing to give out this kind of data, or sharing data. But today most research happens through collaborative data. I mean, citizen science has really shot through the roof, and you have people collaborating with each other. Wikipedia is just one person who's employed there, but people contribute to knowledge. And I'm not saying everything on Wikipedia is, always right. But to me, it's always the first thing, if I want to Google something very quickly, like a 30-second thing, yes, I will go to Wikipedia just to get a gist of it. And then, of course, I'll delve into, my own deeper research. But Wikipedia has become that first kind of cut where you say, okay, iska meaning kya hai? You hit Wikipedia first. It's collaborative. So what we are today is in a very collaborative nature, and this is something that students need to learn through their processes at university. Yeah. So at the end of the day, what we really want these competencies to do is to enable our students to contribute to the SDGs, right? So this is how they can really contribute. So they have the knowledge and they have these various competencies which are essential, of course, not only for them to generally prosper, but this is what education for sustainable development is all about. It's about developing this well-rounded student who understands that we need to live within the planetary boundaries. And to do that, we need a lot of tools, techniques, partnerships, and collaborations across sectors. So if one is able to actually build this from the university level, this automatically extends into society as well. So I also spoke about, these three domains which are important. And very often at university level, we focus on the cognitive domain. It's this knowledge, that's a knowledge and exams, that's what's really important. But not on the socio-emotional or the behavioral domain. But I think if the curriculum is very conscious about bringing this in, this I think will go a very long way in achieving ESD in its true sense. At the end of the day, if all these are there, we can really say, okay, my student is really competent. And this is where we distinguish between skills and competencies. Competencies are not skills. Competencies are an amalgamation of the knowledge, skills, and the attitude that a person has. And that determines competencies. And I think at the end of the day, if we say that, okay, we need to develop these competencies, then a student needs to have the specific knowledge, the specific skill, and a specific outlook, behavioral, socio-emotional connect. That's when you say, okay, person is really competent. So just to give you an example, you take goal 1, yeah, so which is no poverty, and that really cuts across all disciplines. So you look at this, you look at the three domains: cognitive, socio-emotional learning, and behavioral, right? Within your own curricula, it is possible for you to identify the cognitive learning objectives associated with the specific goals. And maybe you can have another column here which says, okay, where does this come into my curriculum, and what's the kind of pedagogy that I want to use to teach this particular aspect. Yeah, socio-emotional learning. Do you build in teamwork, project work, case study work, discussions into your lectures? Behavioral learning. Do you get students to go out and implement or analyze case studies, discuss? So this is how we can sort of bring all of this in when we are actually teaching. Second one, responsible consumption and production. Yeah. Again, this is something that cuts across all, because you have maths, you have economics, you have technology, you have behavioral changes. So it's again something which can be integrated across every single, sector. Yeah. So this is how we can sort of, bring this into the curriculum that we actually teach. So ESD mandates the development of knowledge, skills, understanding, values, and actions, which are responsible for a better living. And NEP also does the same thing. It's talking about inclusive learning. It's talking about holistic learning. It's talking about learning based on inquiry, discovery, discussion, analysis, yeah, multidisciplinary approach, competency-based approach. So you can see that all the things that we spoke of before, are already there within the NEP. So we have a fantastic policy framework that mandates we do this. And now it's essential that as educators, we understand and are very conscious whenever we have our next, curriculum revision, or, within your own teaching, if you can sort of, bring this kind of thing in, which achieves both goals of the SDGs and also of the implementation of the NEP. So coming, I thought that this topic for this particular refresher program was really apt, which is selected by Dr. Kokne, is, you're speaking of sustainability, right? And I think we looked at sustainability, and your conference, your refresher program also talks about development, and I would really merge the two, saying sustainable development. And the conference and the various speakers here, speak to you about community resilience. Yeah. So, which is needed in the face of massive environmental and social change that we are facing. But I think that sustainable development is an important process. It's a tool. It's a pathway to community resilience, only if it is embedded within ESD. Yeah? So ESD is actually the enabler for sustainable development and community resilience as well. And this is something that, being in universities, we can really leverage and bring about as creators of knowledge, facilitating both the upstream and the downstream, transfer process. So with this, I'd like to end that part, but talk about a little bit about this, because Dr. Praveen asked me to talk about this. Is as part of the DST, the Department of Science and Technology's Geospatial Capacity Building Program, for the next 2 years, that's 21 and 23, we have 3 different kinds of programs. So, and I'm going to speak about this in sync with the SDGs, because in this cycle, DST completely focuses on use of geospatial technologies for achieving the various sustainable development goals. So like you saw, this is also part of ESD. I mean, you're talking about developing knowledge and skills, for the SDG goals. So one is the level 1 program, which is a 3-week program where participants are exposed to the basics of geospatial technologies. So there are 25 such programs being held across the country over the next 2 years. So you could actually appear at, if you wish, you or any of your colleagues, wish to build your geospatial skills, you could apply to any of these programs. You also have a program being held here at the University of Mumbai. Then we have a level 2 program, which is an advanced program, which is very theme specific. So ecosystem management, marine sciences, disaster management, and so on. 2 of these are starting on Tuesday, but there are still 7 more to go. And if you already have the knowledge about geospatial technologies and would like to further your knowledge, you could apply to the level 2 program. And the third one, which I would really, really like you to popularize across your institutions, because it targets youth, is the Geo Innovation Challenge. So we have 8 Geo Innovation Challenges being held. It's for young professionals under the age of 35 with an age relaxation given up to 40 years, where any idea that the person feels can contribute to the particular theme which is given in relation to the sustainable development goals, can be submitted. So they're not only prizes, but also the best will be highlighted next year at the United Nations World Geospatial Information Congress. So these schools are both in the online and the offline mode. And as you can see here, down here, dst-igate.in. So all of the information that you need, including the application process, is a centralized process. So you can do it through dst-igate.in. So you have a lot of information there. If you have any more queries, you can surely write to me. And I would also like to take this opportunity to talk about the United Nations World Geospatial Information Congress, which is being held next year from 10th to 14th October 2022 in Hyderabad. So it was held for the first time in China 2 years ago. It's part of the UNGGIM, which is the Geospatial Network of the United Nations. It's part of their program. And India bid for this program, and India was, awarded this program after a lot of stiff competition. So in the run up to this, there are several events being held across the country. So all of these summer, winter schools and geo innovation challenges are also part of, the run up to this event. And I'm sure as people who are interested in geospatial technologies, you would like to be part of the event, because the whole event is centered around sustainable development goals. So the entire UN WGIC is centered around geospatial technologies for the sustainable development goals, right? So here again, you can see it's a huge opportunity. So everything that nations across the world do today is geared towards sustainable development. So as part of this program, we are also in the process of setting up a network of schools, because in India's geospatial ecosystem, schools were never part of using geospatial technology. And the DST is now very interested in networking schools, which is basically young minds across the country, and involving them in projects that could be showcased at the United Nations Congress next year in Hyderabad. And as part of this, from the institution that I come from, that's Bharati Vidyapeeth, we have actually initiated a series of workshops for school teachers, those who are interested in developing such projects, that can be, these schools can then be part of that. And as part of the program, we are also sort of assigning a geo mentor to every school across the country. So this is a network across the country. And if anybody of you want to be a geo mentor to any of the schools near you, or school teachers who are interested and can be a part of this program, do write to me, so that we can involve them in the workshops that happen every month through an online process. So the idea is that we also get school students involved in India's geospatial ecosystem, working on projects, and um, making them aware of SDGs, and teaching them tools and techniques that help them to monitor the social, the environmental aspects, contributing to the various goals as well. So with this, I'd like to really end my talk, because yeah, we are all fed up of the pandemic, but I have this habit of always looking at a glass half full. So I also think that it's an opportunity. So that's the way you look at it. It's also an opportunity to do a lot of things, differently, and letting go of the old way of life. And for me as a teacher, teaching differently, I think is one of the ways that one can move forward, given the huge access that we have to online learning. So with this, I'd like to end my talk.